Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the Amazon River playing as the Force of the High Elves against the Force of the Tomb Kings. And today we are rocking what would, well, to put it mildly, best be described as a cheesy build. Going all out on the cheese because we are going to be rocking not one, not two, but three Lore of Manticore casters, or rather Mages of Beasts. And the reason this build came about is because there was a big old discussion on some of the Warhammer Discords about the fact that High Elves can in fact rock three summoners and potentially get all Manticores off over the course of a very long game. So it was something I wanted to give a shot at. It was something I wanted to try out. Obviously there are not many factions that can actually run three Beast Summoners, though by no means are the High Elves the only ones. Dark Elves, Bretonnia, as well as Wood Elves all have this option, technically. But the High Elves are those who really have a lot of wins in Magic Generation, so I figured it could be possible here to maybe get all 6 Manticores, and that could be pretty brutal. Now do keep in mind, these mages are not that cheap. This whole mage contingent, even though they're stripped down all on foot, coming in with just their wins of Magic Generation items and Manticore summons, this is still about 2,400 gold worth. So, to be honest, is it cost effective? Not that much. But we will be seeing if we can just spam those Manticores and have them thrown at our opponent and see how much damage we can do. And hopefully we can get all 6 over the course of the game, which could get pretty darn oppressive. And that's really the idea with this build. So you bring a bunch of cheap mages, and then you just throw a horde of dirt cheap, high damage dealing monsters at your opponent. Now for the rest of the build, it's really constructed around getting the most out of these ladies. We do have some spearmen here in the front, perfectly adequate to take on Tomb King chaff and trash, and otherwise good at bogging stuff down. Some bolt throwers to apply AP damage at range, slug it out with Ushabti great bows, bone giants, that sort of thing. A handful of rangers here in the back, providing chaff cleanup. Fortunately, or well, unfortunately, depending on how you view it, with the implementation of rangers, you don't really have to go with Averlorn anymore to get a chaff cleaning unit. So, yeah, rangers obviously will mince through cheaper Tomb King troops like no tomorrow. Though obviously, Tomb Guard, if they're around, will still beat the crap out of them. Besides that, we do have a bunch of silver helms here on the periphery, including one shielded variant. Couldn't really afford anything better. If I went with Dragon Princes, I couldn't really bring the heals for them, and I felt that silver helms were a smarter choice. They'll still beat down Necron Horsemen and hold off the big units while being cheap enough and expendable enough to work. And then Everqueen's Court Guard here, these ladies are going to be providing extra wins of magic as well as some point defense with those high AP damage, fire and magic damage volleys. Now for my opponent, he has gone with a rather wide Tomb King build, a little bit of everything here. It's definitely a mixed assortment of units. We've got Arc in the Black rocking it over here with just Spirit Leech and of course Life Leeching. So looking to just spam those spells and whittle down my characters. An Elite Cav had I brought that, but I didn't. Libra Mortis is in there as well, Staff and a Gadge, as well as the Tomb Blade of Arkan for that cheap skeleton summon. This could be a bit of a frustration, shutting down my mobs of artillery, but hopefully we can dispatch Arkan relatively effectively with our Manticore spam. Alongside him, we do have a Tomb Prince. Now this bad boy is just rocking Guardian as well as Curse of Joff, so we got to watch out for the rampages. They are backed by a squad of Necron Horsemen here. There is also some Skeleton Horsemen archers over there on the flank, and really the main contingent is this ball of infantry. We've got a front line composed of Tomb Guard as well as Skeleton Spears and Skeleton Warriors, and the Kepra Guard here as well. So these guys could be nasty. They could melt basically all my infantry pretty quickly and do some work. Eyes of the Desert are in there as well. The Regiment of Renowned Sepulchral Stalkers, a massive threat to my Silver Helms and potentially even characters. Chosen of the Gods are in here, but they are immediately getting pursued off the field by Bolt Thrower Fire. Now granted, most of the projectiles are missing, but Ushabti can't stand and trade, even normal Ushabti can't stand and trade with bolt throwers, much less to Chosen the Gods with their scatter shot, so they're forced to run. Bone Giant is in here as well, providing that high damage output, though fortunately not really any targets for him on the field, and a Necrotect with heals in there as well. As you can see, bolt throwers are going to shift fire at the Kepra Guard. I know that the Bone Giant isn't going to do a lot of good damage at range. I honestly don't have good targets for it, so I figured screw that, we're going to ignore him, and we're going to focus on a high value target like the Kepra Guard. Over here, unfortunately, my opponent does catch out the Arcages that I had hidden in the trees here. I was a little slow on pulling them back. I was hoping to get the jump on him with a bunch of Manticore summons. Didn't quite work out, but we do still have these spears here to screen. They're going to collapse this way. Silver Helm's over here. And so I don't really have to worry too much about an immediate pursuit. Though, as you can see here, we are getting chunked by that very, very nasty Bone Giant. So, you know, the Bone Giant does have a target there, even if it's not ideal. Necrotech is now coming under fire from some of the bolt throwers. We were kind of splitting our fire, whittling down the Kepler Guard. Models killed means they're not going to get any of that region value, so that is a big win for us. We're using those bolt throwers there. Definitely better to use them over Scattershot. And now as they cross into range, the Sisters are going to start opening up. And of course, with regen, they are very vulnerable to that fire damage. As you can see, the summons are going down over here. Manticores are taking flight, tearing their way out from beneath the ground and looking to engage here. Now, Spirit Leech going down in Silver Helms, probably not an ideal usage there, but my opponent does get the charge off here. Necron Horseman piling into the poor Silver Helms, and that was a big misplay. These guys are going to lose for sure here. We're able to get good engagements here on the front line, Rangers diving in, and as you can see, the Manticore is going to go in after the Kepler Guard, looking to knock them out quickly, while the Bolt Throwers do continue whittling down the Necrotech. Now, unfortunately, Silver Helms here getting shut down hard. I really should have shifted these Silver Helms into the fray, but I do not do that, and so that's a big misplay. And the Spears here kind of engage in a Benny Hill action with Eyes of the Desert, trying to shut these guys down and honestly failing, just getting a bit, struggling a bit to get to engage there. Bolt Throwers, in the meantime, have whittled down the Necrotech quite a lot, though the Chosen of the Gods are actually able to get into range here, which is really unfortunate, and start shooting at my Evergreen's Court Guard. Someone goes down, the Eagle Claw through, so we're getting shut down hard all over the front line as another Manticore does go down. And as you can see, we've got Arcane Conduits, Starwood Staffs, and Books of Hoeth all going down, getting us a massive influx of Winds of Magic right now. But unfortunately, that Spirit Leech spam plus the Bone Giant pressure is really whittling these ladies down and making them rout. So big1 issue here. Now, my opponent doesn't know which summoner has gotten their summons off and which one hasn't, but this is meaning that we're not getting as much value as you'd like out of our Manticores. Though they are still doing quite a lot of hurt here to these skeletons over here, really helping break apart this pocket of skeleton troops. And although the Chosen of the Gods are doing some work, they are in turn getting whittled down by Bolt Thrower Fire and really starting to suffer. Another Manticore summon going down. This is Manticore summon number 4 now, and really being quite the brutal engagement here for the Tomb Kings, who did push through pretty effectively, but now are just getting overwhelmed. We've got the Sisters of Avalorn pouring in fire from the flank, and of course they can kind of tank through a lot of damage. Arkan forced to flee for dear life as the very angry Feral Manticore comes in on him. And the Tomb Prince here also starting to take a beatdown from the Manticore, so really not ideal for my opponent here. What was some pretty good engagements early on, turning around a bit as the Manticores just go to Pound Town on these characters. And we still do have 2 Manticores in the pocket potentially. And as long as we've got the Sisters, as long as we do have the Archmages, we do still have a lot of Winds of Magic generation. So we could potentially get a lot of those 2 summons off still. Now, unfortunately, the Manticore there does keel over dead, expiring, fighting the Tomb Prince, but we did get some damage on this guy. This Manticore is also not going to be long for this world. Kind of wasted here against these skeletons, so definitely not ideal. But the Eyes of the Desert forced back by sustained fire. The Necrotech has been assassinated earlier, and the Silver Helms here do sneak through and get on top of the Chosen of the Gods. So unfortunately, the way crumbling works, being irrelevant in this game, essentially, and the Bone Giant, of course, pouring fire in, is going to brutalize these poor cavalrymen, really putting them in the dirt. In the meantime, Arkan, the Tomb Prince here, is just whittling down my Archmage, though she does get one last spiteful conjuration there, summoning one more Manticore from the depths of hell, and it is going to come in here with a vengeance, looking to pressure Arkan and the Tomb Prince. So we are forcing these guys back. The Tomb Prince now down quite a bit. Now Libra Mortis does go down, and that'll protect him rather well. But as they are zoned away, it's going to allow my Bolt Throwers to continue pouring in fire. It's going to waste the time of these Eyes of the Desert, and we are kind of protecting our mages here. Our ladies here, the Everqueen's Court Cards, holding their own all right against these skeletons. They do have some very good stats. So even with charge bonus, these skeletons are not doing very well at all. And my opponent is doing a very good job of pressuring the casters here. The fact of the matter is, at this point, I've only got 1 Manticore summon, and I don't really have the Winds of Magic left to get one anyway, so I'm not too concerned about it. With the loss of the Archmage, I'm not really in a position to try to get that summon. So we're just going to go after Arkan here, looking to pressure that bad boy out, as the rest of our troops do rally on the periphery. And at this point, the battle is in a bit of an interesting phase. I've lost most of my missile troops. There is still this Mage of Beasts here, but unfortunately, she's going to get Spirit Leeched into oblivion there. Only a handful of Silver Helms remain, however, and my archers here, the Everqueen's Court Cards, are in fact going to be routed. And of course, as I mentioned before, crumbling in this game doesn't really matter. So the Skeleton Horsemen here, who should crumble away, are not really crumbling away very quickly at all. And yeah, we're not in a great spot in that sense. We don't have much missile pressure. The Bolt Throwers running out of ammo, doing their best to chip away at the Tomb Prince here, as well as Arkan. But there's still a very healthy Bone Giant on the field, which is kind of terrifying, and we don't have leadership. So it's going to be an interesting endgame here. Sisters of Avalorn do manage to, should hopefully manage to rally. They actually do. That high leadership coming in clutch as these Skeleton Horsemen finally do disintegrate. And although there's only 15 models, they can pour on some rather withering fire, pop in a few shots there, trying to get the beat on Arkin, and, well, not really succeeding. They're doing their best. Problem is that he's kind of getting blocked by his own skeletons, so they're not able to lead him correctly. Curse of Jafir does kick in, dragging my troops into the Skeleton Warriors, so rather well played there from my opponent, pulling in a bunch of these mauled troops into what's not the greatest engagement. Spirit Legion going down, the Silverhelm's one of the last really key units in my army. But it's going to be a tough battle for my opponent. The Bone Giant is not the greatest melee combatant. It does cause terror, and it can do some damage with support, but while it looks very impressive on paper, something like Spearman will actually beat it down. I actually believe even like Empire Spearman will beat a Giant down, a Bone Giant down. It's really not that good of a straight-up combat unit. So as long as we're able to prevent a disintegration, we should hold out fine. Now, as you can see here, crumbling once again, not really doing very much. Takes forever for the Tomb Prince on almost no HP to actually go down. But what can you do? Arkin the Black pushes through, getting shot at by these very angry sisters. They're firing their last cannons at his face, trying to get a little bit of the last second damage on him. And of course, being fire vulnerable, he's going to take some damage. But he does plow through, kills a few of these ladies, and that's going to be it for them. They will rout rather easily there. And at this point, it's a game of attrition. But Bolt Thrower crew here packing up, trying to fall back and escape the Bone Giant. But keep in mind, leadership is low. We don't have... And most of these are sort of those high elf militia troops that don't really hold out all that well when they're sort of struck by fear and terror. So we do have to be very careful. As you can see, I'm kind of trying to keep some of my troops out on the periphery a little bit so they don't tear out and cause a chain rout. Whittling down the Bone Giant over time. Now, Arkin is coming back in. He's got the Staff and Gash going down, reducing his ability recharge. And I do believe this actually reduces the ability recharge on his Skeleton Summon. So it's actually a pretty powerful ability there. And you can see we are going to rain some fire in. The sisters coming in one last time, just absolutely contemptuous of their own losses here, down to 280 HP. Once again, on elite units, high elf units, it's very difficult to break them for good, so they do shatter eventually there. But yeah, Arkin's getting dragged down. He's down to 1700 HP. It's definitely a bit of a scuffle in the pits here. There's not much going for either side. It's just a Bone Giant against a horde of spears, and a handful of bolt throwers still trying to fire. Getting a few shotgun blasts there, essentially, against Arkin. But, yeah, it's not really anything fancy at this point. It's just a grind. And I'm kind of hoping that my Spearmen hold out long enough to survive the Skeleton Warrior summon and drag the Bone Giant down. Now, Arkin is doing the smart thing here, trying to shut down these Bolt Throwers, because if these Bolt Throwers stay online, they can, in fact, pour some additional fire into him, as well as the Bone Giant, help break them a little faster. As my opponent does push through with the Bone Giant, taking advantage of the Skeletons and the Bone Giant's relatively high mass, I am sort of pulling all stops here, trying to throw in all the Silver Helms, just tie down Arkin, buy myself some time, get this Bolt Thrower crew clear, because I do want to keep those Bolt Throwers online. And Arkin here does get surrounded by those High Elf Lancers, and they are doing some damage before routing, but unfortunately, just that leadership isn't holding up any longer. They're not really an elite unit, and yeah. They're struggling. Bone Giant comes in with an absolutely terrifying smack, just sending several of those Silver Helms flying, punching them. Though it looks like they kind of absorb the blow there rather effectively, though it doesn't really help. They're still going to rout here to the terror. So Arkin is staying alive, but at this point, it is definitely close to GG. With Arkin so badly mauled, he's not really going to be able to re-engage very well. The Bone Giant is going to take a handful of pot shots there from the Bolt Thrower that's out of ammo. We've got more Silver Helms rallying here in the periphery, and of course, they can, once Arkin is out of the protective radius of that Giant, they can get the charges in relatively easily. It's pretty safe for him. So they get the engage there on the vile Tomb King Lord, and are able to really maul him rather well. And the Bone Giant at this point is going to disintegrate. He really doesn't stand a chance against all those spears. And so we do see that Titanic construct making his last march here towards the Silver Helms. And we get a Pyrrhic victory. So a bit of a silly build, and with somewhat silly results. Can I say it's a competitive build? I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily a super impressive or effective build, perhaps. But it can certainly have an effect. The amount of Manticores I was able to throw up, especially early on, I got about 4 Manticores off within a very short space of time, was pretty potent. It's about 3,200 gold worth of units you throw up into the sky, and you're able to pressure all sorts of your opponent's key troops that you normally wouldn't be able to do. Normally you've got one or two single entity monsters flying around, and with high elves especially, where these monsters cost an arm and a leg, it's very difficult to get them going. Applying that pressure can be difficult. I guess you could bring some eagles, but it's not quite the same thing as a Manticore, as just this cheap throwaway Manticore summon. That said, I think it would probably be smarter to cut a lot of the Winds of Magic generation items on these Archmages, get a little bit of extra money, potentially get a white lion or two in here. That way, could help hold out a little bit, or upgrade these Silver Realms to shields, get an extra spear unit, something along those lines. Would be, I think, a big boost. And you'd still get your 5 or so Manticore summons in a game, I think. But otherwise, I do think it's not. I don't think it's an amazing strategy, but it definitely can be potent. It definitely can come in as a bit of a surprise factor. And I do think the Manticores got quite a bit of value early on. They kind of managed to knock out the remainder of the Kepler Guard. They were pressuring the Eyes of the Desert. They were pressuring that Prince and Archon continuously, and it made it very difficult for my opponent to focus my leadership as hard as he probably wanted to. Nameless Order was really going hard in the paint after the mages here. But with the Manticores continuously pounding on him, it's difficult to shut him down. Now, for my opponent's build here, for Nameless Order's build, I do think it's an interesting mixed build, because you've got a little bit of aggression here, or you've got the Kepler Guard, of course, Nekarn Horseman. You don't really see Kepler Guard that often, even though I personally actually like the unit, but I don't see them all that often, so it's always nice to see them. Unfortunately, in this situation, they just got torn to shreds by the focused fire from the Bolt Throwers and then the Sisters of Avalorn. They just really were not in a good spot. Bone Giant and Ushabti Great Bows, nice little bit of defensive play, and I think it's a nice little hybrid build. You're not going all in on defense or all in on offense, but you're able to apply pressure either way. Personally, I'm more of an all-in player. I usually like to go, let's say, more of just a straight-up defensive stance. Or maybe just have like one defensive unit to force your opponent to move, and then have a little more combat melee units. But in this case, I think it was a solid build. I'm not sure the Necrotect is worth it, to be honest. I get that it was there probably to heal the Bone Giant through an artillery if it was being pressured hard by artillery, or maybe to heal the Chosen of the Gods. But I think you'd probably be better off cutting the Necrotect and making room for maybe one more Nekarn Horseman. I forget what the exact price on Necrotect is, but I think you could squeeze out Nekarn Horseman if you cut that guy. And I think that would be the main critique or change I would recommend. Besides that, I don't think the build is bad at all. I think all the units performed basically as could be expected, and did rather well there. So, well played to Nameless Order. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun to see something a little silly from the High Elves for once. Getting max value out of those mages, or perhaps not max value, but some good value out of those mages. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.